Hello and welcome to the show. I don't really know what we're going to call this one yet, but you're here on the Craft Growers Network, and I guess I'm kind of hosting this one. But Gabby's here with me, so we're just going to talk. And this might, end up being like a Your Weed Stories or The Way We Grow, because we'll probably get into both of these topics. But mostly we just wanted to do a show together to touch base, talk about a little bit about what we both have going on, as well as some like changes to the Craft Growers Network, I guess. Not really changes, but some additions to the, I don't know, things that the Craft Growers Network is doing. Um, but yeah, Gabby, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It's been a long time since we've done a show together, so I was excited to at least just get some time talking to you. You know,
Yeah.
on 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 your weed stories, we often say that it's just like me and you or me and the guest just sitting on the couch, telling stories. And I think we'll do both of those today. We'll tell some stories and then also talk about the way we grow. So it's going to be a good merge of both of the concepts.
Yeah, I agree. And like one of the reasons why I felt like this was probably a good idea for us to do was because you have some things that you're doing differently. When we first started this podcast, you were selling your clones through uh, Breeders Direct, and now you have your own website. And what I mean, like we've talked about it before, and we've put out the videos about Skunk VA and whatnot, and just the different things that have sort of evolved over the past few months. But yeah, I think that's interesting. Do you want to talk about it at all?
I mean, I don't really want to talk about Breeders Direct or Skunk VA. Um, we
We'll
can
talk
talk
about what
about,
you're doing now, though.
yeah, I mean, what I'll say is we have a new website. It's GabbySI.com. That's GABYSI.com. Um, I will say that I'm happy where I am right now. And I feel that this has been a good like progression for me. And I feel like I've said what I've wanted to say about, you know, those guys, and all that stuff remains on the internet forever, so people can look it up. But
It is what
I
it
mean,
is.
yeah, I mean, to put it mildly, like, okay, I might have said this before, so excuse me everyone for repeating myself, but there was something in the past that happened where like I won. Like me and a former business partner were doing something, and I felt like I won, but I was still bitter about some stuff that had happened. And so I just decided I don't want it to be like that. And you know one of the main things that was going on was I didn't have the Chem 91, and now I have like 7 copies from different people, and that's something that later on we can talk about. But yeah, so, and I've got my own website, and things are going great, and I've gotten an unbelievable amount of support from the community. So I just don't want to be negative. I just want to talk about the positive stuff. So that's as
Good.
far as I want to get into it with that topic.
No, I felt like it was at least good to touch base on it, because
Yeah.
sort of since those videos, you and I really haven't done one where we've talked about where we're at and what's going on with the Craft Growers Network and everything like that. So I just want to like make sure that the community also knows that we've been talking about this. Like this is something that like you probably don't see it in the podcast, but Gabby and I are conversating all the time, just kind of about how we're building this network and how we're building the show and the offerings that we're providing for people. So, it's just good to know that like when it comes to stuff like this, we're on the same page, that a lot of this is like actually very well thought out and planned to make sure that we are saying what we want to have the community hear from us, because we want to be able to like speak the truth, speak what's on our mind, but also, make it so that it's not something that's like overly dramatic or something along those lines. But I do want to, considering I do really like the Way We Grow podcast, and I want to talk a little bit
I
about
love the
your
Way We Grow
history
podcast.
with your plants. Um,
Can I interrupt you real fast?
yeah.
Nice and early in the podcast, I want to say something. I have like 10 episodes of your weed stories like in the can, but they haven't been edited. And, because of the success that I've had with some of my new offerings, it's I've had a lot less time to work on the podcasting, and I feel bad because I have episodes we have another episode from Dell. We have, which was golden. We need to release that one. I have Tom Alexander. I have my buddy John, who owned the grow shop during, Operation Green Merchant. I have a whole bunch of episodes, and I just can't edit them. And one thing I wanted to do was reach out to the community, find out if there's anyone that has editing skills that might be interested in helping us with this project, because I'm kind of at a point where I can record for a couple of hours every week, but I just can't make the time to do the editing. And for example,
Yep.
if we do a 2 hour episode, it's about 4 hours of editing. So really want to figure out how to get this done. And that's why I wanted to make sure we talked about it early on and it's not just an afterthought at the end of the podcast, because wanted to put it
Sure.
out there to the audience and the universe that we need some help.
Yeah, it is a whole ordeal to edit an episode, and so like I only have time to do the one episode a week and edit it, because if I get backlogged, man, it just starts to get a little bit too much to deal with.
Yeah.
But yeah, considering all of that, and we will be getting these episodes out there to the community, so bear with us and enjoy the at least once a week episode, with hopefully maybe twice a week if we ever get our shit together and get caught up. But
Yeah.
for
I really
now,
want it to be regular.
Gabby,
Yeah. Go
it will
ahead.
be eventually. It's a whole process. But we're just gonna dive in a little bit, and Gabby, I want to find out about your past with plants in general, because you have a somewhat fairly well known story with your early journey across the United States, so to speak, and bringing certain genetics out from the East Coast to the West Coast. People know about this a little bit, but what about earlier than that? When did you first get introduced to plants in general? Was your family, did they garden? Were any of them into agriculture? Were you introduced to plants early on in that way, or was cannabis your first plant that you ever grew, and then whatever sprung from that grew as it did?
It's interesting that you asked that question. I don't know why, but I'm a little bit embarrassed that cannabis was really the first plant that I ever grew. Like, but I grew up in New York City, and we did not have a vegetable garden in my home. Um, I do have this memory of my mom, which I'd like to share because, she passed and, I loved her so much. But she used to grow avocados. Do you ever see like when someone takes an avocado pit and they would put like some toothpicks in them? She'd like put toothpicks on
Sure.
the side of the avocado to kind of like prop it up. And then she would grow like, some leaves off the avocado plant. Obviously, it never like grew into anything significant, but I remember that she would um, grow those plants like in just like a jar or something. And she had just
Yeah.
normal house plants, like the spider plants and stuff like that. But my first exposure to growing plants was weed. And what I remember was, and we had him as a guest, um, uh, Clop or the Weasel. Um, he grew weed first out of our group. And I remember, and I think we told the story before, he had a fish tank and he dropped some seeds in the fish tank and they sprouted, and then his cat would dig it up. And they would constantly fuck up his shit. And then he had some fluorescent lights, like just the old school ones. So Klopp had these plants growing in his closet, and it was the first time I had ever seen weed being grown. And I mean, it was really fluffy because it was just grown with fluorescent lights.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, to this day, I can remember what that weed smelled like. And it was awesome.
Sure.
And the terpenes on that, I think, would stand up to anything today. And of course, it was just bag seed, it's from seed that, um, we found in weed and stuff.
Cool.
So
So this was what year? Like, was
this is
this in the
probably
early
19,
80s?
no, I think this is 1990, or I know it was 1990.
90. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how old were you, do you think, when you first saw clop growing?
20.
20. Okay,
Yeah.
so when was your first time then that you encountered weed in general?
Well, I made a podcast with a friend of mine, Stu, and he told the story, and I definitely want to edit it in if we can, because it
Okay.
was it was pretty classic shit. Like, I mean, I'm pretty confident he was pretty drunk when he recorded the episode, and he never recorded a podcast before, and he was like holding the phone all crazy and stuff. But he tells the story about how he was the one that got me weed for the first time, and it came from one of our friends' houses that, like, our buddy stole it from his mom, and you know that's how we got
Well,
the
so
first weed that we ever smoked.
all right, so everyone just hang tight here for a second, and here is the video with Gabby's buddy telling the first time that Gabby smoked weed.
What I want to say is, this is one of my oldest friends, and he's the first person to give me marijuana. And so he's about to tell the story about the first time I smoked marijuana. He smoked marijuana a couple of days before me. So go ahead, Stu.
Yeah, so 1984, I think it was September 13th. I don't know how to remember.
September 13th.
Yes. Yeah, it was right the week before, after, what do you call it? After high school. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we 2 days before that, Mark Sukawar, his mother smoked pot, whatever it was, he was a tenant for I think it was 16 Pilcher Street. I think it was Susie Milson's house. Holy shit, I remember everything. It's fucking crazy. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, what we did was, me and Mark, I said, Mark, I see you have pot. He said, yeah. So we go in there. He sneaks out a little. He goes into his mother's. He goes all the way down, and he grabs this fucking weed that was under the fucking bench or what was the brown thing. Remember that? Can you hear me? 'Cause I can't hear you.
Yeah, I hear you. I just put it on mute so that there wouldn't be an echo. But
All right. So
hold the camera. Listen, hold the phone so I can see your ugly face. All right, like
just
that.
so
Yeah, that's
just so
better.
you know, ladies and gentlemen,
Okay.
give me a pen and paper. This fucking I can't stand the future. Give me a pen and paper. I like it better.
It's actually the present. It's not the future. It's the present.
Yeah, but it's not me. I'm about 1975. That's what I like. Also, just so you know,
Bro,
guys,
we smoked weed in 1985 or
no,
84.
1984, September
Yeah,
13th.
okay.
Don't kick
September
it out.
13th.
So
Okay,
anyway,
so
I
tell the
smoked pot.
story.
So I smoked
Mark
pot.
Sikawa.
Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg. We smoked pot. Me. He goes under the thing. He was about. He was nice. Yeah, he was okay. He was about 5'7", 313 pounds. Anyway, I don't know why I'm bringing that, but yeah, I'm giving you the whole story. So we smoked pot, and I'm like, yeah, it's all right. So I see this guy Gabe, who Gabe had like this curlyish hair, like wavy hair. Gabe was all about Gabe was like a Barbie doll. That's what you are.
Barbie doll.
You were like a Barbie doll. You were all about looking great for the girls, everything. I didn't give a shit, but you were all about looking good and stuff like that. So I say to him, now I did September 13th. So September 15th, I see Gabe. I said, Gabe, I smoke pot. You did not smoke pot. I said, yeah, I smoked pot. He goes, you did not smoke pot. I said, yeah, I did. So anyway, I said, you want to try it? He goes, yeah. I didn't realize I would start a fucking guy be the pothead of America, you know. Anyway, so we go in there. He goes, "Are you telling me the truth?" I said, "Yeah, we smoke pot." By the way, it was commercial weed, ladies and gentlemen. And let me tell you how terrible it was. And Gabe now is an expert in that stuff. He knows how good it is. To me, whatever. We did the stuff. So I go in there. And
And
we
we
go to
stole the
Mark.
weed from Mark Sikawa's mom, right?
Right. He goes into the drawers and he grabs the stuff. And then we smoke and stuff like that. Smoking. And Gabe's like, "We're really doing it, man.
Let me see your face, bro.
We're really doing it, man." And I'm like, that's good. But and he's like, we're really high, man. I don't remember. You got so excited. You were more excited than me about it. Because I was always drunk, to be honest, ladies and gentlemen. I was drinking for 8 years old. In fact, he doesn't even know the story. During the Super Bowl, his mother wanted me to hang out with him in the Super Bowl. I wanted to hang out with my brothers because even though it was
They gave you
1982,
liquor.
yeah, I was drinking. So his mother goes, "Why do you want to go? Do you want to hang out with us? Hey, he wants you to come." I want to hang out with my brother because I want potatoes. I want potato chips and pretzels. No, man, I wanted to drink fucking whiskey at 11 years old. You know what I mean? So, but we go in there and Gabe's smoking. Next thing I know, fucking Gabe. I don't know if you remember this. You were enjoying yourself. Like I'm smoking. Gabe has his pinky up. Man, this is the greatest thing ever. You remember that whole thing? And I'm like, this motherfucker, he really likes this shit. And by the way, it's commercial weed. You remember that shit? And then
I remember it was bad.
do you remember?
I mean, now I know it should.
Do you remember? This is a great story too. Not a great story, a quick thing. Do you remember how excited it was that you thought you discovered America, like you were Christopher Columbus? He said, "Stu, you know what I got today?" So what? I got chocolate Buddha weed. Remember that? So we smoke it, and you were like loving it. I'm like, there's a fucking difference. And you're like, "Oh, man, it's so good. It's good stuff." That was your thing. You were a fucking pothead. You loved it from the beginning. You remember that?
And you're the one responsible for all of this.
Yes, I am. Oh, also, let me tell you another story. So I wasn't a big smoker, it was like he was. But then, Gabe, do you mind me doing this or no?
No, go ahead, say anything you want.
All right. So here's the thing. So now we're in high school. We're in the old days, guys. You could smoke cigarettes outside in the courtyard. So apparently, Gabe said to me, "Let's get some pot." So I go over and stuff like that, get some pot. Trying to get it for, especially Gabe, because I'm a drinker. He's a pothead. We're the same thing, whatever. But apparently, next thing you know, Gabe goes, "No, Stu, I really can't hang out with you. We got to do it quietly." I said, "What do you mean?" The vice dean or something like that caught you. I said, "What are you talking about? Caught you? My mom doesn't want to hang out. Doesn't want me to hang out with you because you're a big pothead." I'm a pothead. I don't even smoke pot. This fucking guy just smokes pot.
You were getting it from me.
Yeah, and I got in trouble for your mother. And your mother said, my mother, she even said to my mother one day at that time, because my mother goes to me, goes, "Stu, what's going on with the drugs?" I said, "Ma, I said, I'm a drinker. I admit I'm a drinker. He's the fucking pothead, not me." You remember that? Got in trouble. But here's the thing. I want to tell a story. Has nothing to do with that because it's the funniest story of my life, ladies and gentlemen. Not a funny story. I have a lot of crazy stories. So my nephew comes over. So I'm not really a pothead, but every once in a while I want edibles. So my father dies, whatever. My nephew starts hanging out with us at the house. So one night I said to him, I want to do an edible. I don't want to go to my room. I want to hang out downstairs in the big house. My mother's all the way on the side. I want to hang out 80-inch TV, relax, whatever it was, right? So anyway, apparently, this is my big word, by the way. Apparently, we're out downstairs, and the glass table lands on top of me. My nephew, stupidly, because he just goes upstairs, leaves me alone. He promised me to stay with me, leaves me alone. So apparently, he lands on top of me. All of a sudden, this 249-year-old woman comes downstairs, runs down. I don't know why. She hears everything. She doesn't sleep. Anyway, she hears everything. She comes downstairs. She goes, "Stu." Stu Man Chew, because I call myself that. Lands on top of me. The glass table lands on top of me. So all the time she goes, "Why is that
I want
glass
to know. Hey,
table?"
stop. I want to know what your mom wants to know. How is a glass table on top of you? It's one thing to fall on top of the glass table, but how is the table on top of you?
Because I'm a silly duck. I don't know what the fuck. Somehow, I was sitting down. The glass, the glass on the table. You know how sometimes it tilts. Somehow it lands on top of me. And somehow this 249-year-old woman hears it. She comes downstairs, marching like a motherfucker, and she goes, Stu! I said, what? She goes, what happened? Why is the glass table on top of you? And then she looks at me and she goes, and why are you naked? And I said, so I'm naked now on this edible. And she goes,
You didn't
why
even
are you
realize it.
Yeah, I didn't really. She goes, "Why are you naked?" And then my nephew says to me the next day, he goes, "Funny as hell." He goes, "You know what you said?" I said, "What is that?" He goes, "Mom, I'm not naked." As I put my shoulders up like big shot, I'm in my nude suit. Can you imagine telling your 249-year-old woman this?
Now listen, one thing. This is your mother, so don't be disrespectful and calling her a motherfucker.
No, I
Because
said,
she's a father. Yeah, you said she's a motherfucker.
no, I said,
You
me
did.
the motherfucker. Listen, I'm drunk.
Ah, ah, ah. But she's a father fucker, not a motherfucker,
Yeah,
right?
but what I'm saying is how funny that she goes, "Why are you naked?" I go, "Mom," and I put myself up like I'm in my nude suit. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see the best reality show, me and my mother would be the funniest characters in the world.
All right, I'm gonna stop this. Hold on a second. I love you, Stu.
All right, welcome back. So, yeah, that's the story. Gabby, was there anything, that stood out in your mind now looking back on that story that you want to like talk about a little bit more? Anything that you remember a little bit differently, perhaps?
Well, I mean, our videos are not rated for young children. We say these were not designed for minors, but if there happens to be any minors that somehow slip through the cracks and are listening, don't steal your parents' weed. I'd definitely be bummed if my
Don't do it.
kids stole my weed. No, I mean, this could be controversial, but like, you know, when the time comes that my kids want herb, like, I'll probably just give it to them, you know. I'm sure they'll be
Fair
above
enough.
18 at that point, but like, I don't know. Like, I don't want them getting shit, like off the street that's, possibly bad. And, so
Yeah.
anyway.
I mean, my dad did the same thing. He wanted me to, if I wanted to have some pot when I was younger, he's like, just come to me. I can get it. And little did I know that he was like not only growing it in the shed outside, but also had a nice stash up in his shop. So
Oh,
I
what?
eventually found that stash and would take a little
You
bit here and there
stole it.
too.
Oh my God. Yeah,
But I think he
it's a
figured
common
it out
theme. It's a common theme.
because dude, at one point the stash changed from being something that was decent to some really old brown stuff.
So he just left you the shit that you didn't want to smoke anymore.
Probably.
Well,
I've never asked him about it.
something that I should say, which is part of my weed story, is my parents were really straight laced. They moved from Argentina to the US, and, you know, what they had learned was that weed was a drug and that, it's bad just like anything else, any other drugs. And I got to tell this story about how my parents found out that I smoked weed, because I used to smoke
Okay.
weed in the house. I'd like stick my head out the window and take a hit off of a pipe, and I was always burning incense with the door locked, and my parents, especially my mom, really hated it. But this was the story about how I got busted for the first time smoking weed. Bless you, buddy. I know you mic'd yourself, but I saw that.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
so anyway, my parents did not know I smoked weed. They had no idea.
Okay.
And I was probably like 16 at the time. And I used to wait for them to go to sleep every night. And then I'd walk around the block and I'd smoke like a giant joint. It was giant, even like for today's standards.
Was this the
And
first time you were smoking weed at 16?
no, I was smoking. Me and Stu, that was like I was 12.
Okay.
But
But
you
this was
know,
when you were at home. This was how you got away with it.
right. So this is when I was
Okay.
older and smoking more, and
Okay.
so
Big old fucking
oh
gorilla
yeah,
finger joints.
yeah. Like I didn't give a fuck. I'd like just But so anyway, every night when I went to sleep, I'd go around the street and I'd walk my dog and I'd smoke a big joint. And I didn't think anything of it. And then one
Sure.
day, my neighbor, she lived 2 doors down. I think her name was Lila. She told my mom. She said, "Hey, do you know that every night around 10 o'clock at night, Gabby will walk around the block smoking a big joint?" And my mom was
So
horrified.
funny.
Dude, like, if you had, like, it's hard to describe how she must have felt inside. Because she was just like, not only was her kid using drugs, and like for her, it might as well have been heroin or, it was like, I'm using drugs, but everyone in the neighborhood knows about it and is talking about it, and she didn't know. So, like,
That's so funny.
oh my God, that like really fucked them up. And like, yeah,
What
I,
was the
I feel bad.
ramifications of that?
Oh, dude, they wanted me to go to drug rehab. I had to go to drug rehab
Okay.
for smoking weed.
Oh,
They
you
were like,
did.
yeah, yeah, which was an
What
interesting
was that like
experience as well.
in the late 80s?
I mean, this one was just like counseling. I wasn't like
Okay.
admitted for 30 days, but like they made me go to like drug
Oh,
counseling,
okay. So
you
you were
know?
still at home.
Yeah. They were like, yeah, if you
Okay.
don't go to this, you're out of the house. I was like 16.
Okay.
And so like we would go together. They would like make, it wasn't
Oh,
like just
okay.
me. It was like they're in there too, wanted
No.
to talk with me
Yeah.
about, and I'm like, I just smoke weed. And dude, this is really funny because I think that must have happened. Maybe I was 17 because I was going to this counselor with them for a while. And when I was 18, okay, one day we go to the counselor and my mom's like, "You're doing cocaine. We know you're doing cocaine." And I'm like, "Mom."
Oh, like they're telling you that you're doing cocaine.
Yeah, they're telling me
That
that I'm doing
Gabby's doing
cocaine.
cocaine.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. He doesn't just because I was telling them that I only smoke weed, right? Which wasn't true.
Okay.
You'll hear about this in a minute. But I was telling them that I only
Okay.
smoke weed. And so they're like, "We know you do cocaine." And I'm like, "Mom," I was like, "You don't understand. I'm dead set against drugs like that. I don't do cocaine. I'm not gonna do crack or heroin. Like, I don't do that type of shit." And so she breaks out this little, um, those little like dime bag baggies,
Mm-hmm.
and it has
Yeah.
a white square in it. It's a fucking hit of
Oh,
acid.
it's acid.
Okay, it's
Okay.
acid.
She's like, that's cocaine.
My parents had no idea.
But it's paper.
They didn't even really touch it. They just like saw
Oh,
there was
dude,
something white
thank
in a bag.
goodness.
Yeah, thank
Could you
goodness,
imagine
right?
if your mom accidentally was like trying to get it out and like licked her finger and pulled it out?
Or my mom was so straight that like if she opened up the bag, some micro dust off of it would have fucking sent her to the moon. You know. So, and I was. I mean, I think it's safe to say I was a kid and I was ignorant about drugs. And I thought LSD, and maybe I still do think that it was way better than cocaine or heroin, right? And so I said to them, we're like sitting at the table, right? It's like a circle table. The counselor's on one side, I'm on
Mhm.
the other side, and my two parents on either side of me. And I said, "That's not cocaine. That's acid." And like, I was so stupid that I thought that my mother, that would like make her feel better. You know what I mean? Like
Did it make her
telling her,
feel worse?
"Oh my God," like the panic in her face, it was like,
So you gotta wonder if, because this is part of that era of like that hippie panic where it was still like you'd hear like, oh, they're doing cocaine. Well, at least people on Wall Street do cocaine. But you hear someone doing acid, you're like, oh my God, they're gonna be a deadbeat for the rest of their lives.
psychedelics. It's
Yeah,
just like,
psychedelics.
why, what, like, why would you want to do that? Like, I mean, and I'll never forget the drug counselor. You know, he was like a former drug user as well, right? You know, all drug counselors are former drug users. And he's like, oh
Okay.
my God. He's like, oh my God. He's like, I've never seen it like that before. We used to just get it on sugar cubes, you know, like he hadn't seen acid in probably fucking like 20 years or something, you know? And now,
Sure.
or, 15 years, and now he's seeing this and he's like,
He's
holy
like, I'm off
shit.
that original MK Ultra stock batch.
Who knows what happened? He probably left with that stuff and probably went off the wagon afterwards. But yeah, so
Oh,
like,
oh, did he? It got left with him,
oh yeah, my parents weren't gonna let that come back home. You know what I mean? He's like, I'll dispose of that.
dude.
Yeah, I'll take care of that. But yeah. So I don't know how we got off onto that story, but it was it was about like I was in counseling because
Sure.
I was a drug addict, and um I guess I'll scoot forward a little bit and then back, and then I'll tell a little bit about how I feel about myself. So 2 years later, I think it was like 1991, I actually got in trouble for bringing weed back from Jamaica. And I won't get into the entire story, but I'll say, it
I,
was
you're past the statute of limitation, man. Tell us a little bit about it.
man, it's so crazy. Like,
So wait, you were okay. Let me just ask a
okay,
couple questions first. So
I should tell the story, but it's crazy.
yeah, I want you to tell the story, but
Okay.
like immediately when you say that, are you talking about like you show up back home and your parents bust you with
No,
some cannabis,
police.
or you were actually like police busted?
Yeah, I'm a
Okay,
felon.
yeah, let's
Yeah,
talk
I'm a felon.
about it.
So,
Is this the felony charge that you've mentioned?
yes, this is why I can't have
Okay,
guns.
tell us the story.
So, um, so, you know, I think I was like 19 at the time when I was just getting in trouble with weed with my parents. And
Okay,
one of my friends, like he was also my source for weed. He was getting weed from Jamaica, and they had
okay.
this whole smuggling operation. And
Oh, your
the
friend had this whole smuggling operation.
well, it was a friend of a friend that was like really in
Sure,
charge. And I don't think
an
it's bad to say his
acquaintance.
name right now, but his name was Ira. I remember Ira was in charge of the whole thing, and I'm forgetting the name of the guy that actually was my friend and dealer that actually hooked me up directly. But the whole idea is you go to Jamaica and you get to stay there for as long as you want, and you have as much weed as you want. And then when you come home, they send you home with weed, um, packed in your shoes or in artifact looking shit, and you get half. So you get a free vacation
Okay,
and um, you get half
and some
of what you
stash.
bring home.
Cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I may or may have not done this a couple of times prior to to getting
To
busted.
getting busted.
Yeah.
Sure. I
And
mean, but then you have like a trail that they can follow like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
oh
And
no, it
then
wasn't
it's
that.
like,
It wasn't. It
oh
wasn't.
no.
It wasn't that. No, that's not what happened.
Okay.
So, um, yeah, and I mean, it was amazing. Like go to Jamaica for like 2 weeks, and like, they put you up in like it was like a cottage, like with these little cabanas, and then every day they'd come by
Nice.
with like, a gallon bag, but it wasn't like a Ziploc bag. It was more like a plastic grocery bag, but like with the
Sure.
contents would be like a gallon of
Okay.
flour, and it like
A
basically
gallon
is
of flour. Everyone, I want you
try
to
to.
just realize
I
that
was
he
just thinking
just
like
referred to the quantity of flour in a volume and not in a weight.
I don't know how much it weighed. It was probably like a quarter pound because it still had all the sticks and shit on them.
Sure.
Like untrimmed on the stick, various levels of drying. Like sometimes we'd have to like leave it to dry for a couple of days because it was that fresh. And
But
holy shit,
there's
the
like
weed
an
was
era
potent.
change there where you go from volume to weight. Like a
I was just
lid
saying like it was a
versus a
gallon
zip.
bag. like a gallon bag. Like I never weighed it, but it was like about that much volume of like what would fit in those gallon bags, and I never
Sure.
measured it. But anyway, but yeah, you can make fun of me for calling weed in a gallon size. I want to be unique. So it was just awesome. Like,
Yeah.
obviously it was stupid. Um, but so what happened was I tried to go with my girlfriend, and like she had issues with her mom. Like her mom was just fucking crazy. And
Okay.
um her mom followed us on Grateful Dead tour. Like,
She
me and
followed
her,
you on a Grateful Dead tour.
yeah. So like, sh- you know, okay, I'll take a couple steps back. It was 1990, and the Grateful Dead played Madison Square Garden, and they played for 9 nights, I think, or 8 or 9 nights. And the first 2 nights we stayed in hotels in the city, and we got thrown out every night because we had like 30 people staying in our room. Okay, so
Okay.
my girlfriend at the time is like, "Hey, we can go to my mom's house." Okay, and so she calls up her mom and says, "Hey, we'll come home, but you got to let my friends stay with us." And her mom was like desperate to have her come home, right? Because she loved her, and
Okay.
because her daughter like ran away on Grateful Dead tour, and she was worried. All reasonable, right?
Okay.
So that night it was like 30 of us leave the Madison Square Garden show, take a take a train to the ferry to the train. So the show ends like 11 o'clock. By the time we get to her mom's
Sure.
house, it's got to be like 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning. 30
And 30 of you
really,
show up.
30 really dirty hippies show up. Okay.
And you're probably all at least some level of high.
All extremely high. Not even some level. We're all, we're all, none of us are not really high. Okay. Those
And
people,
okay, wait,
you know,
just to get a understanding, what sort of house are we talking about? Is this like a little tiny townhouse or like a condo
no.
style house, or is it like an actual like a larger sort of 4, 5, 6 bedroom
Yeah.
uh deal?
She, it was like a 3-bedroom house. Um, 3-bedroom house, or maybe more. It might have been 4 bedrooms, 3 stories. They had a basement and a backyard. And
Okay, so there's plenty of room to spread out, but 30
oh,
people is still going to be noticed.
yeah. So what happens is the first night, it's like 30 people. We get to the door at like 1 something in the morning. Okay. And her mom is like, "These people can't come in here. Look at their feet." Like, no, she's like, "No, they can't come in here." Some of them didn't even have shoes. Okay.
For
Like
sure.
came all the
Oh
way
my
from
god.
Manhattan. Some of them don't have shoes. All of their feet were black. Okay. Cause like Madison Square Garden, there'd be like sodas thrown on the ground. And then like people would just be
Oh, so it's just
dancing
covered with
barefoot and
dirt and
like,
mud.
yeah. And then
Oh,
like your feet would just be black. Not me. I always wore shoes, but a lot of people
for
would
sure.
go
But
barefoot.
that's
So,
crazy.
anyway, she's like, "Yeah, these people can't stay here." They're like, "Cheryl, you and Gabby can stay here, but the rest can't." Okay. And
Okay.
she's like, "If my friends can't stay here, we're leaving." And she's like, "Okay." She fucking brings soap and water outside and makes everybody wash their feet before they come in the
Oh my
house.
god.
Okay. And
That is
honestly, the
hysterical.
feet was only what you could easily see was disgusting. But everyone was disgusting, not showered for days. And, you know,
Sure.
so she
Yeah.
let him in. And what happened over the course of the next few days, the first day it was 30 people. The next day it was 50 people.
Okay.
And by the
Oh
end
my
of the
god.
run, like, I don't even, there was people on every surface of ground, on every floor, in the backyards, just sleeping on the grass. And
And where's mom around this whole time? Is she
dude,
just like busting through everyone, like freaking out?
in a different type of way, and not the way you would think. She like started hooking up with people.
Sure.
Okay, like,
No way.
yeah,
The
like she
mom.
was the mom. Okay, I mean,
Whoa.
she was crazy. Okay, and so yeah, the mom started hooking up with some of these
Damn.
people, and it was crazy. But what happened was the last show comes, and we
Uh-huh.
just leave. We're gone.
Okay.
And so,
Oh, and the mom like is like, I need that fix.
no, it was actually more that
No?
she wanted to be with her daughter. Okay,
Okay.
she wanted to be near her daughter. So she like
Cause
followed us
y'all
up.
just packed up and followed him out to the next one.
Exactly. And so her mom
Yeah.
started doing that. And so like next thing we
Okay.
know, we're on tour and her mom is like in the parking lot with us. And we're like, oh my God, this is like we just wanted to get away from this lady, you know? And
Okay.
and she was following us all around the country. And what happened was me and my girlfriend decided to go to Jamaica. And
Sure. On one
we had
of your
already
trips.
yeah, we had already told the story to a few people about it that we had done it, right?
Oh.
Just close friends,
Okay.
not everybody, but close friends knew,
Sure,
right?
but still. Yeah.
And so what happened was we disappeared to Jamaica for a couple of weeks after the tour, and her mom is freaking out. She doesn't know where we are, and she's asking everyone, "Hey, do you know where Gabby is?" And Cheryl, no, you know. And so um, eventually, she comes across one person that says, "Oh yeah, they went to Jamaica," because they thought she was cool, but she wasn't.
Oh, wait, did they tell her the whole thing that you were out there
No,
for?
she already knew because she like had gotten so involved, bro. Like she ended up like
Oh,
connecting with
so
like
she knew
real,
that weed came from Jamaica. Like when you had weed, it came from Jamaica, and she knew that already.
yeah. Like she not from me, but
Okay.
like
And then
the
she
word,
hears that but she, for sure, the word at least made it around that your weed came from Jamaica.
yeah. And so what happened was
And then mom's hears about it, and oh shit.
she called the cops. She called the cops and she
So
said,
they were
yeah,
waiting for you when you get back.
yeah. She told the cops and she said, this guy brought my daughter to Jamaica and they're gonna smuggle
To
weed,
be a drug mule.
right?
Oh my god.
And so when we got in, like the cops knew we had stuff, but they couldn't find it. It was hidden so well. And when they found it,
Oh wow.
yeah, when they found it, there's like some of the stuff in like her bags with her fucking bathing suits and shit. It was like clearly, we're both carrying it. But they gave me an opportunity to take the fall. They were like, whose is this? I'm like, it's all mine. And they're like, all right, you can go. And so she went off and I got busted.
Damn.
And
So
that's how that went.
what did what were the consequences you faced for that?
So it's crazy because what the consequences were, I got a year of probation and I had to go to drug rehab. That was the deal.
No
That
fines or anything?
I mean, honestly, I don't know how the fuck I got off as easy as I did because it's a big deal, and
Yeah.
my parents didn't have money. My uncle helped get a lawyer. And I always wondered, like, was somebody paid off? Because, like, when I went into court, like, the district attorney was like, yeah, we made a deal to send him to drug rehab for 30 days and a year's probation. And the judge was like flabbergasted. He was like, what? Like, he was ready to send me to
Like we're not
jail.
gonna throw the book at him? Yeah,
Right.
for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. And he's like, you're getting off really easy, son. But he's like, I don't make it a habit to not go by the deals that the district attorney makes. So I got off super easy. And but
Wow.
what was crazy was I went to the drug rehab. And when I went to the drug rehab, this was like 30 days inpatient, and
Mm-hmm.
when I went there, everyone, oh, I should take a step back. All right. So I get busted for bringing weed into Miami, Florida from Jamaica. And dude, I was so bold and like so confident that we weren't going to get busted. And I probably wouldn't have if we didn't get ratted out, right? But I
Yeah.
had a joint rolled. I had a couple of joints rolled. To like, the whole idea was when we had this layover in Florida, we were going to go outside and get high. Okay. And so when the
Sure.
cops finally found all the weed and I'm like being processed, they said, okay, do you have anything else? Because you don't want to bring drugs into jail. You're in enough trouble as it is, you know, so if you have anything, you should just give it to us now. And so I like break out these 2 joints that I have. I give it to them and they just throw it away. So I go to jail and it's Dade County Prison. And when I'm in there, everyone is smoking crack. And like, I've just left
Oh
a
my
place
God.
where I had like unlimited weed and I'm freaking out because I'm in jail and like, what's going to happen with my parents and my life? And like, I mean, at that point, I didn't know if they were going to like throw the book at me like for years to be in prison,
Sure.
you know? So I'm freaking out and everyone's smoking crack. And I'm like, I can't believe I gave up my weed and these people are smoking crack. And
Yeah.
back then, when you went to jail, they would give you cigarettes. Like,
That's crazy.
they would give
Wait,
you like a pack a day plus like the ones that you roll, you know, and papers.
yeah.
And, you know, like, so like, that's the only time I smoked cigarettes for 3 days. So,
That's
and then, you know,
amazing.
I got bailed out. And when I went to court, um, you know, I got the drug rehab. And when I went to the drug rehab, like I said, people were just like, you're in here for weed. They thought I was mocking them. It's like, you know, these people had real problems
I've
with
heard that.
drugs,
Yeah.
you know, and they're like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, you got in trouble for
Yeah.
weed? I was like, they were like more upset that I was there than they were, you know, because it was just so, but yeah, that was the only consequences. And actually, so I
Well,
did
and now
the,
you have a felony on your record, which sucks.
yeah, I mean, it sucks, but like, it wasn't just growing or selling weed. It moved across countries, you know, so it's just,
Yeah.
it was
Fair
stupid. It
enough.
was stupid. And then, you know what's crazy about it was like I came home and that's when I found out about that you could grow it yourself. You know, like that
Right.
was
Because
just
you hadn't
before I
seen it at
met
this
Klopp.
point yet.
I hadn't seen it, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, so like imagine how stupid you feel like, holy shit, I got in trouble and like I could have just grown this shit myself. You know?
Yeah.
So
Well then, so you meet Klopp. That story has been told. Anybody that's listening now, go back to one of our first episodes with Klopp, and he tells the story about showing Gabby this first grow that Gabby sees. So go back, check that one out. And Gabby, though, when was the first time that you took on smoking yourself?
growing. You mean growing?
Did I say smoking? You're
Yeah.
smoking
We
right
told that
now.
story.
You're throwing me
Yeah.
off. Yeah, no, tell me the growing story. First time you undertook growing on your own.
Well, first I'll say I'm smoking blueberry muffin from Earl Hill, single
Oh, yeah.
sourced live resin, and these unpaid advertisement. I don't do it often. I only do it for people and products that I really believe in, and I fucking love this shit. They really, if you live in
Sounds good.
California, go to your dispensary and look for Earl Hill, ERRL Hill. That's what am liking to smoke when I'm not smoking the sour diesel and other flour. But so anyway, I was gonna get my own place in Brooklyn, and my parents actually co-signed for the place. And
Okay.
the entire plan was to grow. Of course, my parents didn't know that. Um, and my parents went on vacation for like 2 weeks prior to me moving into my own place. So I remember I started my first plants like in a spare room at my house and like just had like a single 4 foot fluorescent that I propped up on something with um
Mm-hmm.
with seeds that I started from bag seed. And those
Okay.
seeds were the original plants that I grew, including the Francine, which I think I talked about in a previous podcast. But the Francine, that was one of the plants that made it to California. And that was one of the plants that, that was the plant that I traded with the guy from Virginia for the 91. And I should be clear about this, just so that people don't think that it's VA. At the Warfield, Jason, aka VA Skunk, introduced me to someone from Virginia, and I showed him the Francine, and he loved it. And he told me, and he had the skunk, and so we wanted to make the trade. And so I drove the Francine across country, traded him for the skunk, and he gave me a couple of clones of that. And I brought it up to Greg, aka Chemdog, and I traded him the skunk for the 91. And I ended up driving back across country with the 91 and skunk from Virginia. And, that's how I,
Okay.
you know,
So you found
so
Francine
that
out in
Francine
New
was
York,
important.
brought
Yeah.
her out to the West Coast, and then brought her all the way back for a trade.
Yeah. So
That's
she
pretty
got
cool.
driven. And, like nowadays, putting clones in the mail is like a very regular thing. That's how it's done. But back then, like, you would never consider doing that. Like, much better to take a week-long drive, than to do that. So,
Yeah,
and I
fair
brought
enough.
those plants into
So you're
the
in this new place,
yeah,
Brooklyn, right?
Greenpoint.
All right.
And yeah, set that place up, and it was a railroad apartment, which is just like one apartment into the next apartment, one room into the next room into the
Sure.
next room. 3 rooms in a row. And my
Yeah.
bedroom was in the forest one, and then it was the grow room. Then the next room was the living room, and the living room had the door to the outside, like to the hallway to the apartments, and then the kitchen was
Yeah.
past that. So like there was literally like one room in between, like the grow room, and there was
Mm-hmm.
no carbon filters at the time or anything like that. It was just
What was the setup like? Like what lights did you run? How did you what substrate did you use? What were the things that you what decisions did you make grow wise then?
so back then, and I want to give a shout out to Bill Ross from East Coast Hydroponics. He's where we bought all of our stuff. And I do want to get him on the show, but he's said publicly that he doesn't think anyone cares about his story, which I don't think is true. He's gone through he was like one of the shops that went through Operation Green Merchant, and so I used to shop with him, and he used to teach us, and I still believe that it's correct, that more smaller wattage fixtures were better than getting like one large fixture. So he taught
Oh,
us,
absolutely.
like instead of buying 1,000 watt light, he wanted us to buy 400 watt lights. And the lights that we used back then were
Yeah,
the
I mean,
430 watt Sonagros, is what they were called. It
nice.
was a lamp specifically designed for horticulture by Philips, and it
Okay.
was a 430 watt, and the reflector was like sheet metal that he had bent, like just kind of like that.
Nice. So, that's a really good point in terms of the spreading of the light over smaller fixtures. You think about LEDs today, and each LED chip is only drawing, 1 to 3 watts on average, and that being spread across however many hundreds of chips across a 4x4 or a 5x5 space. Typically, if you're going for like a 1-to-1 replacement with an old HPS ballast fixture or something like that, then it makes a lot of sense spreading out that light over smaller individual light emitting sources is definitely going to provide a more even canopy. I don't really know necessarily if it's as efficient. I don't know the efficiency of a smaller wattage HPS light versus a higher wattage HPS light, but I would assume that you're still just getting a better overall uh, like PPFD map over the top of the canopy of the plant. So that makes
You're
a lot
not
of sense.
getting
It
you're
sounds
not
like this
getting
guy
as
was
much of
on to
this.
something early.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
exactly.
mean,
You're not getting the too much of a peak in the center versus everything else getting less towards the edge.
yeah. And um, it's more point sources of light, more even distribution of light, and also you're utilizing the light that comes off the bulb better because like
Sure.
with single point source lighting, like HID, it's governed by the inverse square law, which means a
Right.
thousand lumens at 1 foot is only 250 lumens at 2 feet. Something like that. It's lost very
Yeah.
quickly with distance. So having the lights close to the plants, you're utilizing most of the light instead of having it just dissipate in that
For sure.
distance.
That is if you don't have reflective properties in play, and then yeah, the inverse square law is that you exponentially lose the photon efficiency of the light the further away from the light source that you get. But by spreading that light out, and you can probably get it even closer to the canopy at that point because each light isn't actually producing that much PPFD at its peak at the center at however many 2 feet away. And then also the heat distribution, right? Like 1,000 watts is going to produce 1,000 watts worth of BTUs of heat versus
Right
two
there.
450 watts. That's putting it in half, and so the actual heat coming off of that is going to be half, and it's going to be more easy to like
Have the plant
homogenize the
have
air
the light
space
lower.
around it, and yeah. So I mean, it sounds like the guy was onto something early. So you have these, what did you say, 415 watt
For
HPS lights,
430-watt lights.
430 watt HPS lights, and you
Yeah.
spread this out around what I'm assuming is your second bedroom. And how many of those did you end up putting up total?
I think it was 6. I think it was
Cool.
6. So
And what was the grow space underneath? Like how big was your canopy footprint?
I believe we used to put a 400 under like a 3x3 area, which was
Okay.
honestly, they don't really cover that much, but that's what we had them over, was a 3x3. So I think my garden was like a 6x9, something like that.
Okay. Cool. Yeah,
That
that's
was
a
my
pretty
first garden.
decent sized footprint. What's that, like 54 square feet or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, considering how much weed was selling for at the time, you know, it was considerable. And
That's pretty cool.
back then I used to grow organic and was using guanos and making guano tea and stuff like that. Um, Hardcore organic gardener at the time. And
Okay.
I
So
think
you were just like mixing up like a soil, or were you buying a pre-made soil?
no, we would buy like Pro Mix and then add
Okay.
guanos to it and bone meal and blood meal and gypsum and all that
Whose
good.
recipe were you using?
It wasn't really a recipe. It was like throwing it together. But because the thing
For
is,
sure.
um, so, the guy at the store, like you couldn't talk about anything,
Sure.
like they had just gotten rated by the DEA, and like the DEA, like I just got into this like 2 years after Operation Green Merchant, which was a big deal.
Okay.
And so, um, yeah, so it was hard to get any instruction and like it's just kind of winging it, to be honest with you. I don't
So who was your guide? Like what did you use when you were like running into issues or stuff like that? Like where did you go to ask these questions?
you know, at that time, there was literally no one,
Okay.
and to be honest with you, and I don't think he would be, too embarrassed, but like Klopp, the Weasel, I think he was using like Miracle Grow at the time, or Peters.
I think he said that, yeah.
Yeah. Like he was just buying like fertilizer at the hardware store, so um and I wanted to grow organic because I thought it was better. And so I was really just winging it. I don't remember where I got the first information. Maybe there was some crude stuff in a book, like, so the books I read was Ed Rosenthal, Closet Cultivator, and Jorge Cervantes,
Okay.
The Grower's Bible. Those were
Okay.
the first books that I got. And I'm proud to say
So,
uh, that I did not steal them. As Jorge mentioned in his podcast, how people used to steal them.
yeah.
I paid for my books. So
So when you were like doing this and you were growing organically and you were kind of, as you say, winging it with the different amendments that you were adding, were you like when you went about it, what sort of mindset did you have? Did you know about like NPK? Did you know about how they had different roles within the plant, and were you looking for like deficiencies and then adjusting for deficiencies, or were you like, I just need to make it as healthy as possible ahead of time so I don't run into deficiencies? Like, I know that sometimes it's kind of like one follows the other, but it kind of depends on the individual on how they go about that.
so the first thing is, I think I got really lucky. That's
Okay.
it's got to be a big part of it. The other thing is that the bar was set so low, like quality of herb that
Oh,
was available was so shitty that, like,
sure.
even if my stuff wasn't that good, it was way better than everything else out there. And this is even
Okay.
prior to like having like really good genetics. Um, and the books would talk about how in plants, in veg you need more nitrogen, in bloom you need more phosphorus. So like, we would get the bat guano and the bird guanos that would have the different ratios. And in veg I'd have it like in a 1 gallon pot, and I'd have it mostly amended with like the nitrogenous stuff. And then in flower, when I would transplant into like a 5 gallon pot, um, everything that I would add would have more phosphorus in it than nitrogen. And so that's what I did. And the other thing is, because I grew seedlings, they just had this vigor that they just
Sure.
they just grew.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was because I was doing a great job or anything. I think it was just that you know okay, so also operating at a lower light level, like
Right.
if you're not pushing the plants and you're not like growing with hydro, like shit might not get all that fucked up, but it might just not produce super well. You know what I mean?
Well, and how
So
big were the pots?
I think I would use like a three or 5 gallon pot.
Oh wow, so that's not super big, you know. Like I know that a lot of people always refer to, especially when growing organics, as the pot being sort of the size of the battery. And if you have a bigger battery, then you can run kind of like on low juice for longer. And so if you are providing like lower lights and a less intensive growing environment, then your plants can get away with a lot without having that substrate be perfect. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I I think that this is something that I want to talk about, because this is the way we grow, and I've been wanting to talk about this for a while. So I do want to talk about organic versus inorganic gardening. But
We have an episode coming up on that we're gonna actually do, and
with
this actually
Tad,
might be the first time Gabby's hearing about it. Yes, with Ted.
I told him
So
I wanted to do it a long time ago, and then I've just been too busy.
So we're actually going to do, and this will be like a little teaser announcement for everyone, and it's still in the works. We haven't done it yet, but we're going to do an episode with Tad Hussey of Kiss Organics and Ramsey Nubaini of JR Crop Tech. And so Ramsey being someone who's part of the team that developed this salt-based fertilizer that they use at large-scale agriculture, versus Tad, who has created his Kiss Organics substrate mix as well as amendment blends that is used at not only commercial spots but a lot for home growers. So it'll be a really interesting conversation just to talk about the differences and nuances between the two. And Gabby and I have been kind of throwing it around as a debate, but it'll be more of like a friendly conversation so that viewers can kind of see the mindsets of the people that go into creating these products that are used successfully across the country. So that'll be a really fun one coming up. But Gabby, let's talk a little bit about what then changed your mind into wanting to grow using salt-based fertilizers, because I know that that was like a profound experience for you in the cultivation scene, that you like in your own personal cultivation experience.
It was, and this is what I was hinting that I wanted to talk about. Um, so I used to grow organic, and to put it in an example, I always tell people like, if you brought me a pound of, hydro grown herb and wanted to give me a gift, I was such a snob that I wouldn't accept it. Okay, like I wouldn't even be polite and take it. I was just such a snob about it. That like I
Yes.
should I should yeah I should have like taken it and maybe given it to other people that would appreciate it. But like I said, I consider myself like the biggest organic snob. And I'll never forget that I read this flyer. Oh, to put it in perspective, the 91, you, the Chem 91. Greg called it the Chem Dog. And when I got the plant, I was like, I'm not calling this the Chem Dog because I grow organic, so I just called it the dog, and so again, I was a complete snob. And so I went into this grow store and it was Diamond Lights in San Rafael, which is like one of the like original grow stores, in California, if not the country. They used to make lights too. And
Oh, cool.
they had a flyer there, and it was from Green Air Products. And I remember the flyer was talking about this fertilizer that they had. And on the back, it said something to the effect of um, mineral fertilizers are made from mineral compounds. Oh, excuse me. Organic fertilizers. Let's edit that and start again. Organic fertilizers are made from organic mineral compounds, and these mineral compounds need to be broken down into their more common mineral form before the plants can use them. They need to be disassociated from the carbon before the plants can use them. So plants don't eat organic material. They don't eat bat poop or bird poop. It needs to be digested so that the plants can use it. And that's why we would add all this biology, you know, make all the teas and
Right.
stuff to try to create biology that would help this process happen, right? And then it said minerals are the building blocks of all life on the planet. And it just struck me. It just,
Sure.
it's like such a powerful statement. I'll say it again. Minerals are the building blocks of all life on the planet. And so I
Yeah.
decided to try
That's a
to,
great point.
yeah. So I decided to try to grow with minerals, hydroponics in media. Hydroponics, just for the beginners out there that may be listening. The definition of hydroponics is the plants get their food from the liquid fertilizer that you give them. Okay. They're not getting any food from stuff that's in the media. Okay. It's all from a liquid form. And so, a lot of people, you know, have been growing hydroponics for a long time and didn't know. If they're getting their Miracle Grow and mixing up a gallon and watering their plants with that's hydroponics, right?
Sure. Hey, even a quick, like a sprouted seed tea or a compost tea is a form of a hydroponic application of nutrients to the plant, because if you are dissolving some readily available nutrients in that water and the plants can uptake it, that is a type of hydroponics. Now, I know that a lot of people will be like, no, that's not hydroponics. But, listen, hydro just means water, and we're just adding the water with the nutrients in it to the plant. And like Gabby said, the plants can't uptake it unless they are in like these basic ionic forms. And so the the one thing that I do know that I have to touch on really quickly, because I feel like there's going to be organic growers out there that are going to be like, well, wait a minute, what about this and that? The enzymatic pathways within the plants, like the chitinase pathway and the lignase pathways, I believe, but it's these enzymes that the plants produce within its exudates that are going to also adjust the sort of responses within the plant that can produce different terpene profiles, different flower structures, and different like morphological responses within the plant. So yes, it happens. Organics is definitely going to produce a different product than something grown in pure salt-based fertilizers. But hey, you can always do synganic and add a little bit of these back into the system. But just wanted to throw that out there before people start getting up in arms about one or the other.
We're lucky we don't have a live chat, right?
That know a lot.
People
right,
be interrupting
us
us right now.
Conversation with people that are a lot more intelligent than us about these things, who have created products about it because they understand the science behind it. So before we get into that too much in the comments and whatnot, let's just throw that out there. But anyway, so you see this product that's like and its slogan is like a little light bulb moment for you where you go, oh shit, well, that makes a lot of sense. So what did you then do? Did you immediately snatch it up and start going?
So the funny thing is, I didn't buy that product. I bought another hydroponic nutrient. The hydroponic nutrient that I bought, just because it was more well known. Maybe they recommended it. It was General Hydroponics, had a grow and bloom powder. Okay. And it's funny how, like, when they started, they made powder nutrients. Then they went to the liquids, and now everyone's going back to like dry soluble fertilizers, But at the time, there was no like 3-part liquid or anything like that. They had a grow powder and a bloom powder. And man, I fed the chem dog that. I shouldn't. I fed the 91, the dog, the chem dog, whatever you want to call it that. And it was like night and day. The plant was so much healthier.
Compared to the organics?
Oh, yeah. Like organics, the plant never finished. It would always deteriorate before finishing. Okay, you could, because it didn't have a lot of leaves on it. And those leaves would get necrotic and chlorotic and they would just fucking disintegrate. Like, you're 50-something days in there. It's not done, but it's done. It's going to die. You can leave it there to die, or you can cut it, right? And once I started feeding it with hydroponics, this plant would make it to finish. It would still be difficult, and it would still, but like, it would get closer to reaching its genetic potential. Okay, and
I'll tell you, anecdotally, it sure crushes in rock wool under hydroponics, especially when making seeds with it.
Yeah, I've never to this day I've never grown it in rock wool. I have grown other stuff in rock wool, but never the 91. So it's good to know. But
it shot past everything else, and it was the smallest to start.
Well,
for anybody wondering what we're talking about, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, we're making some seeds. But so anyway, I started growing with hydroponic nutrients because I was seeing the plant was healthier, and I'm not saying that I was the best organic gardener. A lot has been learned since then, right? But I was actually trying a lot harder than most people, and then even a lot of people today. Like a lot of people today, their method of organic gardening is like they have a container and, they amend it with some soil and then they just water it with just water. And I was like watering with teas of some kind at least a couple of times a week, and it was disgusting. I mean, dude, I made vegetable scrap tea. Like, I was a vegetarian at the time.
Sure.
And all the food scraps I'd put into a bucket and I'd aerate it and I'd feed that to the plants. So like,
what a hippie.
Oh yeah. I did shower though.
That's good. I'm
Yeah,
glad to hear that.
but yeah. So I want to be brief about it because I could take the whole show to talk about like what I feel about organics versus hydroponics. But something that's really important to me, um, I'd love it if everybody listening to this video did a search for Bob Canard, Canard. And he was my organic gardening teacher at the Santa Rosa Junior College when I was studying there. And what he taught us, this was organic gardening in a field. And he would take earth that was really damaging or damaged, and he would repair it and turn it into like the Garden of Eden, where
Oh, cool.
he would throw seeds on the ground and they would just grow like the best food ever. And what
Nice.
he taught us was that you have to grow 2 plants for nature for every plant that you grow for yourself. And that way you're always
Nice.
feeding the soil and improving the soil. And, he would talk to us about, making compost tea and getting water from the river. And, but one thing that he taught us was that plants grow on minerals. Okay. Just like in that little hydroponic thing. And, he would never go and like dump a whole bunch of compost on his plants. Like the amount of compost that people would put in one hole, he wouldn't put that on his entire field. So
Interesting.
like the compost is to just add the biology, right? And the
Right.
only organic matter that the plants were getting fed was the other plants that had grown and lived their entire life and even, made seeds. And so like his garden, it looked like a bunch of weeds. You walk through there and it's
Sure.
like waist high weeds you're walking through. But then as you're walking through, then you'll see a clearly defined row, and it's just defined by the plants, right?
Sure.
And because he would teach us how to plant the plant the crop. Hi, kitty. He would teach us how to plant the crop. He'd be like, you walk and you have your seeds and you throw them like this. Every time you step, you go like this. He was hand seeding the fields, okay, just like this. And then when the plants grew, you'd go there and there'd be, rows of these plants that got seeded that way.
Sure.
And like I said, it was the Garden of Eden. And
Nice.
I really believe in organic gardening. When I talk about how I believe growing in a container, that if you grow organically, it's a problem. You're tying your hands behind your back, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't love organic gardening. I just think that there's a proper way to do it. And then there's a way where you're just kidding yourself. And by kidding yourself, I'll give an example. I remember people used to grow in Fox Farm soil, which wasn't even organic, right? Fox Farm soil, and they would water it with just water. And they
Mm-hmm.
would think that their shit was better because they didn't use hydroponic nutrients,
Yeah.
And if you're not feeding your plants properly using organics, just because it's organic doesn't make it better, And I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of respect for Tad. Maybe he's got a formula that he's, where if you follow this formula, but I haven't seen it. Okay. And I believe, and I don't like the term synganic because that
Yeah.
means synthetic, right? Okay. I like minerals and organic, the
Right.
hybrid. Give your plants, the minerals that we know they
Sure.
need, because we know plants need 16 essential elements. Without those elements, they die. So let's give them that. And then we can supplement it with things that they appreciate. Okay. Some organic material,
Right.
and that enhances the product because of the things that we don't know and the little things that you know, add to the quality of a plant. So since this is the way we grow, I wanted to make sure that I told everybody that that's the way I like to grow. So I don't ever want to give people the idea that I don't love organic gardening, because I do. I just think that there's a place for it. And I don't think that that place is in a container. Like I don't think
Fair enough.
growing in a 5-gallon pot or less, you know, I don't think it's easy to have your plant reach its genetic potential that way, because it's very difficult to give it everything that it needs, you know, the entire time,
Sure.
so yeah, like I said, Dr. Bob, or not Dr. Bob Kennard, I just gave him a doctorate, but Bob Kennard, um, he should be a doctor with the life experiences that he's got, like what he knows about plants is just incredible. I'm sorry, I'm holding my thumb over the lens. There was an umbrella and it was noisy. What he knows about plants is incredible. To give you an example, we used to go into the classroom and he would have us bring in our vegetables. Okay. People bring in their tomatoes and their squash and their lettuce and stuff like that from their garden. And he would be like, "Oh, you're growing this in compost." And he'd be like, "How do you know?" It's like, "Well, because this tomato, it's so watery and it has no sugar, no life to it,
Sure.
and it's because when plants take up too much nitrogen, like they do when they're grown in a lot of compost, particularly when it's trying to be an organic garden, um, you get a waterless, flavorless crop, and
Yeah.
or he'd be like, "Oh, you're growing in sand, very sandy soil. What do you live in, Sebastopol?" Or like he could just look at your crop
That's
and
pretty
know how
amazing.
you were growing it. Like he was so in touch with plants. I've never seen anyone like that. And yeah, so I love organic gardening. I just think it should be done in the ground, and
Agreed.
you know, no offense to Tad and to other people that are, so okay, I think I can summarize it and finish it up like this. I would love to be wrong. Like I want to learn. Tad, show me how to grow organic to where, I can get the quality. I understand that organic production, you might lose some of the yield. I've always been willing to accept that. But the issue is that I don't think the quality of an organically grown crop in a container, I don't think it's easy to get close to reaching that genetic potential that way.
For
I
sure.
guess that's how
Or
I would
consistently
summarize that.
reaching that genetic potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. It does seem like, especially when you think of like the actual term organic and the fact that it means that that there's carbon association with everything, and the fact that even within like soilless substrates like peat moss or cocoa coir, or even if you're going the hydroponic route in rock wool, there's not a lot of cation exchange capacity that you would find in something that does have actually like true soil with like sand, silt, and clay in it. So it is it's going to be an interesting conversation when we get those two guys on the show and we have them kind of go over their thoughts on this, because it's not easy to just dismiss, because I do see people growing successfully in organics, but they do it in such this, it's almost like a more of an art form with science associated to it. Whereas if you're doing hydroponics, you can just kind of flip the switch and go, and it doesn't really require too much adjustments throughout. You can kind of use the formula that's given to you, and it should work consistently time after time, as long as you're keeping all your other parameters within the desirable ranges. So I do think that that's a really good point, though, especially when it comes to like container based growing. And it's going to be a lot harder the smaller the container is to create enough of a nutrient load and at the right ratios, right? especially when you're trying to senesce a plant or something like that. If you're trying to go organics. But for all the viewers out there, we've had a few technical troubles. So we're going to roll this episode down a little bit, and we're actually going to do a two-parter, and we're going to get more back into Gabby's story, as well as kind of just more of his experiences in the next episode. But for this episode, we're going to wrap it up with a few things that are going on with the Craft Growers Network, as well as just other things along those lines. So we did hint earlier that Gabby and I are actually starting a seed line, or a pollination project, or whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to let Gabby talk about that, because a lot of this was his idea, and I am helping execute this, and we're kind of just doing this together.
Well, I definitely think it's a team effort. And, I have, throughout the years, I've acquired some genetics, but most of the time it's been in female clone form. And while I'm not opposed to doing reversals and S1s, what I really wanted to do was get back to doing some breeding with males. And I've gotten a couple of males from some of the seeds that I've recently gotten. And, you had a space, and you're a trusted grower and partner. And we wanted to make something for the Craft Growers Network that, just like our network and how our podcasts have come together, I want to work with Nick. I mean, you guys are watching his podcasts. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the guy. And so we wanted to make, or begin to make, seeds under the Craft Growers name and brand. And so I've given him a bunch of the genetics that I have. He has a bunch of genetics. And, we're going to keep the lid on what the crosses will be, but I'm sure you guys can imagine that there's going to be some chem crosses in there and some sour crosses in there. And yeah, I'm really excited that we're starting this project together, and it's just the very beginning of what I know is going to be a lifelong project. And it's something that's going to help Nick and I bond even more than we already have. So there's just a lot of good things coming out of our relationship. And I want to make sure that I take the moment to tell Nick and everyone, how grateful I am for this guy, because if it wasn't for Nick and Cosmic, I wouldn't have done this Craft Growers Network, and you guys wouldn't know about my story and the way I grow. And so, yeah, I'm super.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thank you, buddy. I'm super excited and grateful to be where I am today, I guess, is the motto of what I want to say.
For sure. And yeah, so we won't give away too much about the seed project quite yet, but it is definitely something that you're going to want to keep your eyes open for. We should probably have the project completed and hopefully released, pending some potential testing, by the end of this year, early next year. So keep your eyes open for that. And then Gabby, one of the guests that I feel like has had such an impact on both of us so far, from our shows, is Jesse of Mothership Labs. Both of us have continued keeping up with this guy, talking to him. He's helped us with a lot of different things when it comes to tissue culture and just like knowledge in general. And I know that you and him are also working on something. So if you'd like to talk a little bit about that here as well, let's do it.
Yeah. I would say, and I know you'll understand that there's probably nothing that I'm more excited about than what I'm doing with Jesse right now. And, Jesse and Jay have given me an opportunity to, be a part of this company. And, basically, I believe that tissue culture it's not even the future for cannabis propagation. It's the present, and it's necessary. And with everything that we've learned about hop latent viroid and even simpler things like, mildew and insects, tissue culture can really take care of all these problems. And so, what we are going to be doing at the Mothership Labs, what we're trying to do that's different at Mothership Labs is we're trying to do things that other people have done, but do it with a better ethical approach. Like we want to make money, but we want to do it while maintaining, man, I'm forgetting the term that we used.
A trust with the community.
Right. But there was an actual word that we used. I don't know if it was ethics, might have been, but the whole point is like, other companies that will remain nameless, they just go and do like a hit and run, and people's genetics have been stolen and, promises were made that weren't kept. And, we want to go into this with a different type of moral compass. We want to do something where people are confident in our arrangement. And so for one thing is, we don't want to be a repository for genetics. We're not trying to convince people to give us their genetics, right? We want it to be a situation where it's like, well, hey, do you need meristem tissue culture done? We can do that for you. Or we can teach you how to do it. Okay. And it's the same thing with long-term storage or, any of the other services that we provide. We can teach you how to do it. And, we'll probably sell you some supplies, at a competitive price and, give you some consulting that'll be far less expensive than having somebody, tissue culture your entire library. What I tell people is for the amount that it costs to do meristem tissue culture on one plant, you could probably have a lab. So we present
at
this
least a small home lab, you could easily do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a few $1,000s, you can do something, and so we're not trying to convince people to give us their genetics. We have enough. Now, if people want to give us their genetics, then, we can provide them with opportunities. Like we're going to be able to sell plants worldwide, with the sanitary certificates, and having gone through tissue culture and meristem, we'll be able to ship plants worldwide. So like if you want to take your garden worldwide, we can help you do that. But, we have a ton of genetics that we can do that, ourselves. So like I said, we don't want people to think that we're trying to just grab their stuff. Really, what we want to do is figure out, hey, what do you need? Sure. What's best for you? Is what's best for you? Like, so I'll never forget, like in speaking with Kevin Jodry, I told him that he should set up a lab. And he's like, I don't want to set up a lab. He's like, he's like, I'm a farmer. I could do it. He's like, I don't want to. I just want to pay somebody to do it. So there are people that are in that scenario that, they don't want to be convinced to set up a lab. They're already got enough on their plate, right? But then there's other people that they've just been told like, this is too hard. You're not going to be able to do this. You need to pay us money. And we want to show people that that's not true either. This isn't rocket science.
No,
it's
I really
science.
do like what
what
Jesse's doing over there. You know,
Yeah.
I do agree. I really like what Jesse's doing over there, and he's really like promoting this as something that isn't uh it isn't this like
Unobtainium.
like this barrier to entry. Yeah, it's not an unobtainable thing. It's not something where the barrier to entry is going to be so high that it is only for those that have the privilege to do so. It's going to be something that is made more widely available and to more individuals within different communities of the cannabis community. You know, because there's just different communities within cannabis as a whole, and to make it available to a wider variety of people is going to be a huge benefit for the community as a whole. So yeah, I do think that that's really awesome, and I'm really glad that you're joining the team over there, and that Jesse is sort of helping out also with like the Sour Genome Project, as you've called it, where you're looking at these
And the
different cuts of
91.
sour and trying and the 91 and trying to see where they are similar, which ones might actually be the same if possible, and sort of demystifying a little bit of the lore around it, because it is something that is so heavily debated amongst individuals, saying, oh, this cut is mine or that cut is mine. And you know, as you even know, like the renaming of cuts, it just happens all the time. And so it is really important to at least get sort of a baseline of information out there to people. So whether or not something is called the Gabby SI sour diesel or the AJ sour diesel, you know, whatever it may be, people will at least have the knowledge of where it came from and sort of how it relates to these other cuts.
Well, let me give a little update on that, because people ask me about it. And um so I went from the guy that, even though I have a history with the 91, I didn't have it, and the person that I was reaching out to get it didn't want to return it. It took me a minute. But I went from the guy that did not have a copy of the 91 to now I have a bunch of them. And I have a copy from Finest. I have a copy from Farmer Joe. I have a copy from VA. Um, I have a copy from Greg, um, aka Chemdog. He had that guy from Maine who's been holding it for him forever. He had him send me one. And I also got the one from Greg's dispensary, which I'm forgetting the name of it right now, and a couple of other ones, right? Basically, like anyone that wanted to send me a copy of the N91, I would take it. And the whole idea was to do this genetic sequencing so we can find out, are they all the same? Or, is some an S1, or, is it a cross of some kind, some other bag seed? So the more copies that we had, the more that we could learn, right? Now, I had originally gotten some information that turned out to not be correct. And that is, like we were told, like we could get the sequencing done for like a few $100s per plant, $200 or $300 per plant. What we found out is to do the deep genome testing, it's more like a couple of $1,000s per test. And that's just not something that we can do. It's,
Yeah.
10 tests. If it's, even $1,000, $10,000 to do this, we just don't have that money. So we're trying to see if we can exchange for services. Now, what I should say is you can get the genome testing for like just a couple of $100s, but it doesn't go as deep into it. And so what happens then is you everything looks the same. Like Kevin Jodrey said that they tested the OGs and all the OGs were the same plant. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Kevin, but I think that shows that they just didn't dig deep enough, right? And
Sure.
so we want to make sure that we do the most comprehensive test possible, and it's expensive. So I'm hoping that we can get a company, and we're talking to a few of them about doing it, that will sponsor this testing, okay, and not charge us the 10, 20 grand that it'll take to do it, because in the end, I think just what we learn about it will create so much awareness that more people will do the genome testing. And I think if you're going to put out a new
For
genetic,
sure.
you should do the genome testing, and you should get it mapped. And that way you can prove years down the line what is the real deal and what's not. You know, um, I definitely think it
Right.
would be a mistake to
I mean,
release
that
a
would
new
be the best
genetic
way
and
to
not
go
do
about
that.
it.
Yeah, and honestly,
That
it's
that
what I want
definitely
to
be
do
the
with
best
all of our
way.
stuff too. Like if we ever have
I
a
think
specific clone that we want to release, doing that testing. Geez, I don't know why that happened.
that
My phone just shut. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to release a genetic and you want to be certain that you can identify it years down the line, the only way to do it is by doing this, genetic sequencing. And so, like I said, I think we're going to do a lot of awareness building for it. So I'm hoping we can get this sponsored. And I want to do the same thing with the sour. So we've got the Sour Genome Project. I got excited and, got an Instagram for it, and the 91 Genome Project. And I definitely want to do it. And I mean, what I want to avoid doing is asking like for money from the community. Like don't want to make a GoFundMe to do it. But I mean, I simply can't afford to finance it at this point.
no.
So that's where we are with
No, it
the
sounds like
Sour
it's something
Genome
that
Project.
it will come. Sure. Yeah, like it will come and stuff like that. Also, there might be more funding available for it, not necessarily just from the community and community sourcing, but potentially from grants in the future. Who knows? It might be something that is worth uh, the research in terms of just to have that information out there, and what better to do it on than something that is as widely passed around and has been held for over 30 years. So that would definitely be a great place to start, because you could also sort of look at those epigenetic drifts that occur over time as the plant ages and as it's aged in different hands. So there's going to be different environmental pressures, there's going to be different practices and cultural practices within that person's garden that could change that genome over time. So it'll be a really fascinating thing to look into. And like you said, if someone really wants to do it right, they have to get that genome on the plant early in the plant's life cycle. So right after it's been germinated as a seed, and then you need to maintain that plant in as pristine health as possible. And one of the ways that you can do that is in vitro culture. So I think that's going to about do it for this episode. Unfortunately, we're just still running into a few little technical issues here, but this is just part one of this conversation with Gabby, and we're going to continue this conversation talking more about his story. We'll probably even have more updates on both the seed project and other projects that we're both working on. And so that's about where we're going to wrap it up for today. But Gabby, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I still don't know what we're going to call it, but whatever it is, it's going to be under the Craft Growers Network. And for everyone out there, thank you for joining us. Gabby, do you have any last remarks you would like to say?
I appreciate you helping me get my story out there, Nick. And as always, it was fun talking with you. We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy that we started doing this, and there'll be plenty of more episodes to come with this. And there'll probably be even some like your weed stories where we dive a little bit more into some of the individual stories, maybe bring some of the people back on that are from your past and to help tell this story. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode.